presentation on interpersonal communication theory and entertainment of the show The Office. My purpose is to show how key interpersonal communications concepts appear through this show and how you experience them through the main character's behaviors. Now, what's The Office? The Office is a mockumentary style sitcom where you are basically, it's sort of like a play, but you are basically faced in an environment in an office with employees under the Dunder Mifflin Company. It's a paper copying company, fax company in Pennsylvania in the show. But the main focus that I'm trying to get into is both perception, the interpersonal concepts, perception, nonverbal communication, emotional intelligence, active listening, as well as assertive communication. The first one, what is perception? Perception is when we view others, we shape how we interpret them. Okay? So one of the many examples in the show that I personally like to use, that I also wrote for the outline portion, is one of the characters named Michael. Now, Michael is basically the boss. He's the manager of this office portion. This is like a little office building. He is the manager of, I think, about 15, 20 people. And one of the things he perceives himself as is relatable. The cool and good boss, the amazing boss that everybody turns to. However, during this, a lot of the employees see him as immature, childish, unprofessional. And when you get into the aspect of watching the show, you can start to see the problems, the misunderstandings that may happen, the frustrations, the loss of respect. You can kind of see how this sort of communication issue becomes a problem when it's interpersonal, when you're going one-on-one, when you're speaking in meetings. So if somebody doesn't view him as like the actual good boss and sees him as immature, less respect, not very much going to be listening. Next, nonverbal communication. What is that? Nonverbal communication is when you are speaking or receiving messages without the use of verbs, without the use of verbal words, speaking. That can either support what you're saying or contradict what you're saying. Some of the things is like what I'm doing, moving my hands, gestures, body language. You also have facial expressions, the way somebody perceives or the way you can see somebody reacting to what you say or what you do, as well as eye contact, the person making eye contact with the camera. If you can see their eyes and you guys are making eye contact, most likely what's happening, speaking the truth. But ultimately, these are some of the most common ways to communicate non-verbally. So another concept that is relevant in the show that I believe is very important is emotional intelligence. One of the key issues that I saw was how people reacted emotionally to what was being said. But quick explanation to what emotional intelligence is. It's pretty explanatory, or it's pretty understandatory. You're understanding others' emotions as well as your own. So if I were to speak to you one way, I would have to understand where your emotions are at and where you stand when I'm speaking to you, as well as have you try to understand how I am speaking. It's a two-way thing, okay? One of the examples that I hope that you guys, no, you can't see it, it's live. One of the examples that I put on my slideshow was Michael, when he's meeting and greeting his coworkers, okay? He tends to speak without thinking. Now this becomes an issue because he's not being very considerate of how other people are feeling when he speaks. If he's not saying something correctly, if he's not really reading the room or seeing how everybody else is feeling before he starts speaking. That is one of the And one of the big issues with that is the way, like we just talked about perception, it's the way you perceive what somebody else is doing. So if they cannot have the emotional intelligence to seek what is happening, then most likely what's going to happen is, like I just explained, less respect. You're starting to think that this guy is not really a good boss. Okay. Another concept: active listening. A lot of the times during the show, a lot of characters would zone out during conversations. For example, when Michael, they called everybody in the office to a meeting, there was one character who did not listen at all. Plain, was doing a crossword puzzle on a newspaper. Active listening is when you are actively giving your full attention to the speaker. In the example I just provided, he did not give his full example. He did not give his full attention to the speaker. So it's very evident that he was not actively listening and engaging with what was happening during the meeting. But one of the key things that I believe would work is going through 3 steps. You've listened to what's being said and you are paying full attention to what's being said. You go to clarify, you ask for clarity. What questions can be asked? And if they can be asked, how do you kind of go around the issue? And the final one is respond. If somebody else has a question or if somebody else says something, respond to them. Make sure you're giving them your full attention and engaging with them so they know that you're listening and they know you have obtained the information. And finally, assertive communication. This is probably the biggest part of the show that I believe should have been implemented. But assertive communication is clear and respectful expression of your words and your actions. If you are interrupting somebody, that is not respectful. If you're speaking too quiet or you're not exactly responding to what somebody's saying, you're being very passive, right? If you can see here, just on the board, you have passive, assertive, and aggressive. Assertive sits in between passive and aggressive. Why? Because you don't want to be too passive to where you're not actually engaging with somebody, and you don't want to be too aggressive to where you're overpowering what somebody says. Okay? So one of the key things that I believe needs to be kind of maintained is that, like in this show, characters struggle with being too passive or being too aggressive. So, for over conclusion, communication shapes workplace relationships. Every time you want to communicate, have a conversation, have a workplace relationship, have a friendly relationship, any sort of relationship, you need to have communication. And just like we went over, perception. Not having the right perception causes misunderstandings. Non-verbal. Not everybody understands gestures, facial expressions, and eye contact. So a lot of the time, you can have mixed messages. You just need to communicate that with the people that may not understand. Emotional intelligence, active listening, and assertiveness. These are the 3 positives that I believe can be implemented in the show to improve the communication, especially with assertiveness and active listening. Just being present and engaging and being respectful goes a long way in communication.